finally time to give the Roman Colosseum a go, one of the 7 wonders of the world. The Roman Colosseum was built between 70 and 80 AD. Took 8 years, give or take. So what remains today is about 1900 years old. This replica here, almost 10,000 pieces, was the biggest Lego set when it was released and still remains one of them. So very excited to get this started, and here we go. So as we get started on the base here, it's worth noting the Colosseum was actually built on the site of what was previously a man-made lake. 26-foot drains were installed to drain the water, and a foundation was put in place where the Roman Colosseum would sit. Between 60 and 100,000 people were involved in the construction of the Colosseum, with some of the heaviest labor falling on thousands of Jewish slaves that were captured in the First Jewish-Roman War, and they carried thousands of tons of travertine stone from a quarry nearly 20 miles away in a neighboring town. Now, in addition to the labor, much of the funding for the Colosseum construction came from that Jewish-Roman War in the form of relics and treasure that were obtained when temples were sacked, Jewish temples. What you're seeing built here is the Hypogeum. This was the underground where animals and fighters would stay prior to their fights on the stage floor above. Before that was built, that was actually added later on. Before that was built, they often flooded the arena. They did mock naval battles and different things, but once they added that Hypogeum, that was no longer viable. So what we're getting into now is the lower exterior wall. As you may notice, half of the Colosseum has those lower walls around the outside. This was actually due to a major earthquake in 1349 that collapsed the south wall. That south side was built on a less stable terrain. When that stone collapsed, a lot of that was reused in many other buildings throughout Rome, palaces, churches, hospitals, etc. As we get to the more intact half of the Colosseum, there were 5 levels of seating, the highest level being rooftop nosebleed seats reserved for the lowest class of people. They would be over 100 foot above performances below and would sit or stand on wooden benches. There were 80 arches on each of the first 3 levels, all of which were entrances to get the 50 to 80,000 people in and out of the stadium. 76 of those entrances were for the general public, 2 for the emperor, and 2 for the participants. It's also worth noting attendance to these gladiator fights was free. Compliments of wealthy Romans who would sponsor the events for political popularity, and apparently that worked very well during that time. So we are putting the finishing touches on here. We have finally finished the Roman Colosseum. About 17 hours to put together the little over 9,000 pieces. I talk a lot about LEGO's attention to detail, so I wanted to start with a side-by-side of the existing remains of the Roman Colosseum next to this build here. As you can see, a ton of similarities in just the overall structural shape, but as you see some of these still photos and the close-up video, the level of detail goes several layers below to resemble the existing remains today. One thing that I thought was really interesting is the actual fights that took place in the Colosseum were often not the fight to the death matches that I think are portrayed in our society today. It was actually more similar to our modern day version of boxing. So there were referees, there were different classes of fighters based on size and skill. There were doctors on hand to tend to injured gladiators. So again, very different than I think what is often portrayed of the types of fights that happened in the Colosseum. The other thing that I thought was fascinating was this held events for a span of a little over 350 years before the structure began to deteriorate and the Roman Empire didn't necessarily have the resources to keep it going. But overall, a fantastic build, certainly repetitive in a lot of ways. They did their best to have some variability throughout, which I thought was great. But looking forward to maybe doing a smaller build next time, something a little quicker. In fact, if you want to comment, let me know if there's a one out there you would like to see me build. Be happy to do that. I'll just take the one with the most likes and add that to the queue. I've only got one left, so looking forward to adding. So I appreciate you watching. Thanks so much, and I hope you enjoyed.